Hi, Ed Wizard. I know I'm late, but I know it's very early Eastern. Just gonna wait a couple of more minutes. It's very early Eastern time zone in the US. I think it's 8 a.m. I was supposed to go live later, so it's 9 a.m. Eastern time, but I do have a place to go after, so you may watch this in replay. That's fine, and I'm sure a lot of you will watch this in replay. I don't know what time zone you are, but a lot of my viewers are from the US, I think. So sorry if it's too early. Today we're doing Samuel 2. 2 weeks ago we did Samuel 1, and I wanted to stick to this routine. I cannot do it more often than this. I tried last Monday. I really tried last Sunday to go live, but doing it every Sunday is a little bit too much because I do have offline stuff as well on Sunday, especially on Sunday. And so here we are 2 weeks later doing Samuel 2. Hopefully this can be consistent, and in 2 weeks we're gonna meet again for Kings 1. If you haven't watched the previous live, you can check it on my account, Samuel 1. Samuel 1 was the beginning of the reign of the first king of Israel, Saul, very bad king. It was all about him, and this little rise of David the poet. But Samuel 2 is all about about David the poet. And actually in the Greek version, instead of Samuel 1 and 2, you have Kings 1 and 2. And Kings 1 and 2 in our Bible is actually Kings 3 and 4 in the Greek version. So it's all about kingdom, and its messiness. So Samuel 2, I will try to be quite brief. I'm not sure if we can do it 1 hour, like usually it might be 45 minutes, but that's fine. Samuel 2 is all about David. So David's triumphs. In the first part of the chapter, we have David's triumph, and second part is David's transgressions, and the last part is David's troubles. And it is devoted to David. It's the second. David is the second most mentioned name in the Bible after Jesus, and I think it's 62 chapters in the Bible are dedicated to David. For your information, an equivalent of 1,100 verses. After that, we have Abraham, just so you know, have a comparison. Abraham, 14 chapters, Joseph, 14 chapters, Jacob, 11 chapters, Elijah, 10 chapters, and David, 62 chapters, just so you have an idea. Hi, Samir from the UK. I miss the UK. Okay, so have a lot of things about David: city of David, star of David, lineage of David, seed of David, house of David, tabernacle of David, root of David. It's clear that it was the person God chose to, it's from David's lineage that Jesus will be born, and I will explain that a little bit later. From Belgium. In Psalm 71, that is not written by David, is written by Asaph. It says, he rejected the tribe of Joseph, the tent of Joseph, and did not choose the tribe of Ephraim, but chose the tribe of Judah. It's from the tribe of Judah that David and later on Jesus will come out of. So David first was a shepherd. Then he became a servant, doing his internship in the palace with Saul. We saw that 2 weeks ago. And then sovereign a nation by itself. And David was actually the youngest king. He is overlooked by his father, but God chose him. That's a recap of Samuel 1. God chose him and called him a man after God's own heart 2 times. And it doesn't mean it's perfect. He has a lot of flaws. But it was a man to fulfill God's purpose, says another translation. That's another translation, after God's own heart. So in Samuel 1, Saul dies in a battle against a Philistine, and also 3 of his sons on Mount Gilboa. In Samuel 2, David mourns him, lamented him, and although Saul was his enemy, so he's kind of like similarly to Jesus, but failed, obviously, to be the king of Israel again, and that's why we needed Jesus. Thing is, I will jump some of the things because it might be too long, some of the details. The thing is, David is quite of a emotional human that is kind of led by the heart, and you can see a lot of like emotional reactions, but not really disciplined. Like a lot of times, even when his sons die and like his daughter gets raped, he's getting sad. Like he's expressing emotions. So all the Psalms, poets are emotional people, can be in a way, but doesn't actually take sort of action or doesn't actually do anything. He's like that. And so David was successful in his career, but miserably failed at home in family. And he had eight wives we know of. And that it's very hard to please, like, imagine trying to please 8 women, even one can be hard. He was coronated king. So in chapter 2, he's coronated king over the house of Judah. And David has 3 anointings. He has a private coronation by Samuel, that is in Samuel 1, at Jesse's house. And he has a public coronation to rule over the down south of Judah, not the whole nation. And then third, he has a coronation over all Israel. Okay, let me remember what I wrote here. So there was another, before David became the king of all Israel, there was Ishbosheth, which was one of Saul's sons, who also wanted the throne. And Abner crowned him as a king over the 11 tribes. So Abner was the commander-in-chief of Saul's army, and Joab was the commander-in-chief of David's army. So there was a little bit of a conflict there. So because Saul is dead, and Abner didn't want to lose his position, he takes someone from the house of Saul to crown him. which is Ishbosheth. And that gives rise to a 70-year conflict and actually the first civil war in Israel. So David in the south and Ishbosheth in the north. In chapter 3, verse 1, it says that David grew stronger and stronger, and Ishbosheth grew weaker and weaker. I guess David had God's favor on his life. And that's when, if you remember, when you were at Bible school, you have, it's Abner. It's within that period of a reign. Abner sees the hand on the wall, the writing on the wall, and tries to negotiate with David a peaceful handover of the kingdom. So in the end, God kind of gives a full kingdom to David in that way. So after 7 years, David unites the whole nation in chapter 5. So that's like we're still in David's triumphs up to chapter 11, I think. Now, it became public knowledge that sometimes, at some point in time, Samuel anointed David, son of Jesse. He was 30 years when he was publicly coronated and reigned for 40 years. That's with that. Then David secures a capital. Before Jerusalem, there was Hebron was the capital, and David didn't want Hebron to be the capital, but rather Jerusalem, because before Jerusalem was called Jebus. It was run over by Jebusites, and it was strategically located on a hill. So Jerusalem was on a hill, and the hill was going down, and then there was another hill. So which makes that when somebody attacked, you could not only see them like down the hill, but you could see them like going down the other hill that is above. So it was really like it was a natural fortress. And Psalm 126, it's a metaphor for strength, like Mount Zion, which cannot be moved, as mountains surround Jerusalem. So the Lord surrounds his people. It's a metaphor. Which is a nice metaphor, by the way. Next, where was I? It also talks about a water sprout and the tunnel to bring water. Actually, maybe that's important to mention. So the Jebusites were proud of this natural fortification, and David wanted to, to have Jebus, Jerusalem, be the capital. So he's planning, an attack. How do you call that? A takeover. So David says, whoever can figure out a way into the city up the water tunnel will be my commander-in-chief. So there was a water tunnel from the pool of Siloam. That was where the water was going. And so that was the only way actually you could get into the city without fail. And that was the only chance they had. We have in chapter 6 a little bit of talk about the arch, because I don't know if you remember, but the ark was brought to Jerusalem, and the ark hasn't been in the tabernacle for 40 years. It was in Obed-Edom's backyard. It was in someone's backyard for so long, and because it was stolen, I don't know if you remember, that's when that's when Samuel died, when he heard the ark was stolen. So the presence of God was not with, during Saul's reign, was not with Israel. So they are trying to take the ark back and bring it to like bring it up to Jerusalem. They were trying to do the right thing in the wrong way, because there was a specific way to carry the arch. So God, in the arch, it was the presence of God. That's how the presence of God was kind of manifested during the Old Covenant. So everybody who would touch it would die if they didn't respect the protocol, because it was a holy, 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 holy place. It was a holy, 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 holy place. And we couldn't touch it. And that was strong. Holy, holy, holy place. And so Uzzah and Ahio were two men. They drove the ark on a cart, but it wasn't, because it was easier, it was the hill. But it's not like that the arch was supposed to be carried. There was a specific way God instructed. It could only be carried by a specific tribe and in a specific way. So Uzzah was killed because he wanted to stabilize the arch, and he took it in the wrong way. And only the Levites actually were allowed to carry it. So David was goal-oriented, because they put the arch on a cart. It was easier to carry up the hill. But being sincere is not honest and wanting to do the good thing, bring God's arch, in Jerusalem, was not all that matters. Abraham and Sarah were also goal-oriented and wanted to get to the goal by themselves. Completely forgetting about how what are the specific instructions that God gave to them. Like David was goal-oriented, Abraham and Sarah was goal-oriented, but it's not all that matters. They failed miserably. So 3 months. Actually, the way you could carry the arch was walking. The men were carrying it walking, and it took 3 months to carry it that way. It was a big place. Not a small hill, definitely not a small hill. So in chapter 7, is crucial, and Mary understood this chapter. Mary, the mom of Jesus. That Jesus was the son of David, son of Abraham, upon the throne of David. Chapter 7, verse 10, I will appoint a place for my people. God is making a covenant with David, and David will have a son who will build a temple. Solomon, although God never asked for a temple. Wait, what did I write here? Yeah, David will have a son, Solomon, who will build a temple, although God never asked for a temple, for a house. But David would do it anyway for God. Sometimes we want to do stuff for God that God never asked us to do. We want to do so much for God. We want to build this. We want to do that. We want to do this and teach that. God didn't tell us to. And it's a fine line when you really obey what God told you, even if it's something tiny that it's not your dream. It's not what you envision, but it's what God told you for that season. For example, he told me, read the overviews, do the overview of the Bible. Read that, have that settled, before getting into the details, before studying the scripture more in depth, do the overviews. Start by that. It might not be, what I envisioned. I may not want to do it, but I know I need to do it because it will build me up. And for example, going back, unconditional covenant. So that's when the covenant was made with David, everlasting covenant, which will give birth to the actual son of David, Jesus, not Solomon. God often blends a near fulfillment and a far fulfillment. Something that will happen with Solomon and something that will happen with the greater son of David, which is Jesus. David's dynasty succession will be interrupted in 586 before Christ by the Babylonian captivity. In fact, God will curse the line of David and Solomon, Jeremiah, because of a king that was corrupt. I will explain something important now, but it will be restored by Jesus Christ and conquered of sin, who will actually conquer the world, not David. So this is why there are two genealogies in Matthew and Luke. Matthew follows the record of David's genealogy down to Joseph, which was the cursed line. And Luke follows the record of David's genealogy down to Mary, which was not cursed line. And that's why Mary had to be born of a virgin. I'm sorry. That's why Jesus had to be born of a virgin, Mary. So that Jesus is not, directly attached to Joseph's line, which was the cursed line. The cursed line because of a corrupt king. I don't know if that makes sense. Hope it does make sense. That's why there are two genealogies. So now Jesus has the legal right, because Joseph wasn't his father, real biological father, but Joseph has the genealogy back to the legal right to the throne. But God cursed that line, so God got around his own curse by having a child born of a virgin and letting his mother's genealogy go back to David's as well, but not through the cursed line of, was that Jeconiah, Solomon, David, but the one through Nathan. Oops, I'm getting a call. Wait, just 1 second. Da. Sunt în direct. Ai putea să vii tu după mine, dar spun când să pornești. După aia poți să mergi sau direct la biserică sau poți să trec și pe acasă. Cred că o să mă lași înapoi acasă după aia. Să-mi iau mașina. Încerc să fac în 20 de minute, dar spun chiar când termin. Ok, 25-30 maxim. Ok, ciao. Oh, okay. So sorry about that organization. Yeah. So you got that right. Yeah, that means yes. So that was David's triumphs. That was the first 10 chapters. He unifies the nation, secures the capital, and never once defeated. He was never once defeated in battle. Yeah. He expands the nation from 6,000 square miles to 60,000 square miles. There is prosperity everywhere. There's a chicken in every pot, how they said, a car in every garage, or a camel in every garage. But David picks out after 20 years. So he picks and starts falling back down. And that's what prosperity does to you sometimes. It's chapter 11, the most vulnerable moment in his life when he is the most prosperous. So when you're in greatest ease and everything is going just as you think it should go, you are most vulnerable. It happened in spring when kings went to the battle, and he had popularity too. And David remained at home because, I'm old enough to go to the battle. Like, this is for young people. I will not go to the battle. He didn't go to the battle, and he stayed at home. And while he stayed at home, what does he do? He saw Bathsheba bathing. Yeah. If he would have been in the battle, he wouldn't have been with Bathsheba. Bathsheba was the wife of Uriah and the daughter of Eliam, and he thought she was beautiful. So it's one thing, I said here, it's one thing to, have somebody pop in your face and like you cannot, like you accidentally see. It's another thing to, wait, what? Turn back and look again, which is what he did. Like, he didn't just, okay, he saw her bathing, he could have just ignored it. He actually inquired of her and actually brought her in and laid with her. And so it's interesting, like, she purified her after laying with him and went home. And that's how it builds, like, how sin grows is actually, it's a thought, then it takes form, then it becomes fascination, and then fall. David enters now his cover-up scheme. He wants to cover up for the sin, the adultery that he did, because he didn't just do that. She became pregnant. And instead of, encouraging her husband to go lay with her so that, you don't know whose son it is, he actually plans a scheme of killing Bathsheba's husband. And he gets Uriah drunk, Bathsheba's husband drunk, and gives him a sort of a letter to give to the commander-in-chief, Joab. And in this letter is actually his own, like, death warranty. Like, in this letter, it says that Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, shall be put into the front of the battlefield and eventually get killed, because that was at the heat of the battle. That was the most dangerous spot to be in the front of the battle, in the front and in the heat of the battle, which happens. Uriah gets killed. And then there's a whole series of roller coasters of, like, because of, God can forgive a sin, but there are consequences. And you're going to see the roller coaster of all these consequences and the troubles that it brought over his family. And things go south. Chapter 12, for a whole year, he gets by with it. Nobody knows anything. He even wrote a psalm in that period, Psalm 32. He wrote, "When I refused to confess my sin, I was weak and miserable and groaned all day." Like, he knew what he did, but he will kind of forget what he did. And that's when Nathan comes into play. He will be kind of blind to his own sin. Let me say that. In chapter 12, Nathan was a prophet sent by God to tell him a parable. And the parable was about a rich man, a poor man, and a little lamb. And the rich man, emblematic of David, poor man, emblematic of Uriah, and little lamb was Bathsheba. So in the parable, the rich man steals the only one lamb of the poor man. Poor man had a lamb, and the rich man steals it and to roast it and eat it during a feast or something. which was a horrible thing to do because the rich man had a lot of other lambs. So David gets angry at this parable. He gets angry at the rich man of the story who stole the only lamb of the poor man to roast it. But David is blind to his own sin that this was a parable, like talking about him. And Nathan tells him, "It's you, the rich man." And did he realize? You are the man, thus says the Lord. And that's in Samuel 12, 2 Samuel 12:7. God told him everything that he gave him and every bad thing he's done, and to kind of remind him of his sin. And thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall blah blah blah. And he also said, oh wow, nevertheless, because by this deed you have utterly scorned the Lord, the child who is born to you shall die. So in the future we will have David's child passing away. You will have his daughter getting raped by his it's horrible atrocities. His daughters Tamar gets raped by Ammon, which was the half brother Absalom, David's son. So it's a family issue. Tamar gets raped by a sort of half brother. David is very angry but doesn't do anything about it. Again, he is very emotional about it. Very angry, not really angry because he doesn't do anything about it. Then Absalom started to hate Ammon, who raped his sister. David didn't do a thing. Started getting emotional because it's kind of like he had no moral background because he did the same mistake. He did the same sexual sin. But that's an enemy lie when it tells you that just because you did that, you don't have any, place to educate your children because you were bad. You did the same mistake when you were young. That's a lie. Like, all the more because you did it, you should tell it to your children and say, hey, look what I've done. You don't want to go there. I've done that. So his family's like falling apart, but he wants some sort of reconciliation. Absalom ran away, but David wants to bring him back. However, David doesn't speak to his son for 2 years after bringing him back to Jerusalem. Sorry, I'm a little bit rushing over it. And this causes bitterness to grow in Absalom's heart, who commits an act of treason. He starts speaking. He's stealing the hearts of the men of Israel. With his good speech, he starts speaking nicely to the men of Israel and gains their favor. And then for 5 chapters, Absalom rules and kind of unofficially rules and sends his father into exile. I'm summarizing years into like minutes. Until Joab kills Absalom. Anyway, one trouble after the other until chapter 11, when Absalom dies and David is deeply moved and went up to the room of the palace at the top level, where we suspect probably maybe the room where it all started with Bathsheba. And he mourned because he never reconciled. So another lesson we learn here is that you're not going to mourn that you didn't have a nice house or a nice career. You may mourn at the end of your life you will mourn or you will regret unsolved relationships more than any material thing. So, he never reconciled with his son, which causes a deeper wound than, whatever else. Chapter 18 to 23, he kind of gets back on track after all that misery. And chapter 23 is the final words of David, which says, "This is the man raised up on high, the anointed of God of Jacob, the sweet psalmist of Israel." God took a kid and turned it into a king. Yes, he did. "For though my house stands not with God," which means although I make mistakes, "yet he had made with me an everlasting covenant." Wait a second. Where is it? And he says more than this. "For does not my house stand so with God? For he has made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and secure. For will he not cause to prosper all my help and my desire? But worthless men are like thorns that are thrown away, for they cannot be taken with the hand, but the man who touches them arms himself with iron and the shaft of a spear, and they are utterly consumed with fire." Didn't really get it. I don't have anything to explain on this last chapter. Wait, I do have something else to say though about the chapter 24. It's his last mistake with the census. Even the chapter doesn't end well because he does a mistake again. Sorry, even the book doesn't end well. His mistake with the census, he ordered a census, which is counting all men of Israel. And that came from sort of selfish ambition of wanting to know, if he has enough men to go to the war, not really counting on God, wanting to know. So the thing is, in Exodus 13 and 12, there was a rule on how to count Israel. So Israel belonged to God, not to David. And so a man only had the right to count what belonged to him. So it was up to God to command the counting. And if David counted, he should only do it at God's command and receive a ransom money to atone for the counting. There was supposed to be a ransom money for each family. And however, he ordered the counting without consulting with God, and the commander-in-chief disagreed, but David still wanted to do it anyway. It's sort of like way to get Rome funded and get money. And God sends a plague because that was the pact. They had to, only God was able to count them in order so that there is no plague. So the Lord's judgment comes for that too. But God always, although he forgives and the consequences remain, there's always I do believe in the sovereignty of God, who, Satan tempts David, and God allows it. Like, Satan cannot tempt without God allowing it, and allows it to happen. Allows all of the destructive things to happen, but he then restores it. It's a fine line then between free will and God's like everlasting plan. Same as the king. Was a king the plan of God? Some may argue no, because it was supposed to be a theocracy and God was supposed to reign. But on the other hand, before, there was a verse where it says, when you shall come to me and ask me for a king, blah, 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 may the king be from the tribe of Judah. God knew and anticipated that they were going to ask for a king and had a plan for it. He always has a plan. So that was a quick Bible study. Samuel 2. 2 weeks from now, we're going to do around the same hour. We will do 1 Kings. And then 2 Kings and so on. Let me check the comments. Yep. Well, I had asked about the DNA of the line of David and Solomon as well. Was that a question? Right. Let me go back from the beginning. Oh. Hello from Belgium. Where are you guys from? Are you guys from Europe or from the US? Kind of, yeah. He kind of overruled. America, okay. US, so that's early in the US, is it? It's 9 a.m. Eastern. I don't know from where in the US, but it's Poland. Poland is the same time zone, I think, as me, so it's fine. We will see that later. US, unfortunately. Poland. Hello. Hello from Poland. Ohio. Yeah, that's 9 a.m. That is 9 a.m. I work for them. Some of my clients are in the Eastern Coast, on the Eastern Coast. Okay, well, if this hour is okay, or even like 4 to 5 Eastern, 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern European time, then I'm gonna do it at this time because we still have natural lighting. So if that's fine for everyone. Okay, I'll have to go now. I'm leaving. I have a friend waiting for me. We'll see you next, 2 weeks from now for Kings 1. Bye-bye. Have a blessed Sunday.